Hi, everyone, and welcome to my podcast. Today, I'm back on with Leeví because the first time we did a podcast together, he was beautiful and incredible, and I thought it was so beneficial to me and to others. So we're going to be back on today talking about different steps of the spiritual path. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me once again.
Yeah, it's an honor, man. All the way from Iceland, all the way from Iceland.
Yeah, so many things to talk about about my unique country.
Yeah, it's an incredible place, and you're the only person from there I've ever met, and I cannot wait to visit.
Yeah, I can't wait to
um,
have you, brother.
yeah. So I will start us with a guided meditation for us and for everybody that's on this journey with us, and then we will get into our talk. So let us all, wherever we're at, gently close our eyes and begin to focus on the spiritual heart at the right side of the chest, and just take some long, deep breaths through the nose as if you're breathing right in to that spiritual heart. And the great saint Ramana Maharshi points out that anyone you meet from all over the world, when they say I, they point to their heart. You don't see people point to the head or to the brain, because we all know intuitively that that spiritual seat of consciousness sits right there in the heart. So we'll take some more breaths right here into this space. As you're breathing here, freeze yourself into present moment awareness and ask Jesus, or whoever you pray to, say, I surrender to you. I surrender to you. Show me the way that leads out of suffering and into love. Show me the way that leads from the unreal to the real. And so, as we're breathing into this spiritual heart, consider the truth that each of us is not a body or even a mind, not even Alex or Leeví or who we think we are, whatever your name is, but a conscious, present awareness that ignites the body, that ignites the mind, that manifests those things, but that we are prior to that, that our true being is prior to that. So consider, who am I really? Maybe even putting your hand over that right side of the heart, and think, who am I before I was born? Who will I be after? Who was I during sleep last night? What was it that woke me up and made me conscious this morning? What is the energy behind all of that? Breathing into the heart, a few more breaths. And with these last breaths, begin to think the mantra, I am loving awareness. So as you inhale, I am loving awareness. And as you exhale, I am loving awareness. And you're not just imagining this, this is what you truly are. I am loving awareness. I am loving awareness. and repeat this a few more times and consider how you go to sleep at night and you don't know for how long. And then some power wakes you up and then you think, here I am. And so what is this I? And can we live our life as a spontaneous unfolding, even our spiritual path, rather than thinking we are the doer, the actor, or the controller? Ramana Maharshi says when we think we are the actor, it is like someone who gets on a train and they carry their bag on their head the whole train ride when they could have just set it down and they would have got to the same place anyway. And then we'll just take 3 more silent breaths into the heart, thinking I am loving awareness, or just feeling a stillness here. And then with your last breath, one more time, reaffirm saying, I surrender. And then you can open your eyes. Amen.
Amen, brother. Thank you.
Yeah.
That was fantastic.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So, yeah, now that we're in the spirit, where did you want to begin?
One of the things that I felt a lot of people need to hear, especially that are in spiritual community and have a lot of these spiritual people around them. I've not been blessed with as many spiritual companions for most of my path, but thing that I felt I've seen a lot, and you've probably been aware of this too, is this idea of spiritual materialism.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar?
Yeah, tell us more.
Well, the idea is as the ego or the sense of separation, which I would rather want to call it because ego has multiple meanings, right? This sense of separation likes to attach to a plethora of things to think about, to hold close to them. And so you can see this a lot in the New Age spiritual community, or in probably all of them to some extent. I'm not sure how far this extends, but it is at least a little bit in every place that people tend to make their spirituality into their identity, which is the opposite of its purpose.
Yes. Ram Dass, my teacher, talked a lot about spiritual materialism all the time and how we can almost grab onto that as another identity. And
Yes.
we can very much romanticize it. And it's okay to fall into that trap, but as much as we can get out of it quickly or avoid it, and I was able to avoid a lot of that through his teaching. So maybe people can see that through us, that yes, we have to keep surrendering identities and roles. And like you said, if we're accumulating more ego stuff, it's actually bringing us the opposite of where we're trying to go on the path.
Yes. One of the reasons I wanted to get into this is I feel like this is probably the most common false stepping stone on the path, because people are in need of a sense of purpose, and so it's very easy to take it to the same places that you've taken other things before it. And like you said, the surrendering and the practice, I think the daily practices are important to allow you to sort of surrender that. But also in the Western esoteric tradition, the power of silence is also a very big thing to be aware of. So not to talk too much about your path to others and respecting that they might not see it the same way you do. There was this thing that is popping into my head at the moment that Tommy from the retreat we went to said to use the language of the birds, a poetic language that might not throw people off of the message that you have, but rather put it in a way that all can benefit.
Yeah, I love that. I think that we in the spirit, there's so many in this modern age, like you want to get into it later with technology, so many spiritual paths, practices, teachings, and traditions. And there's always going to be beings in all of them that you build up this spiritual ego or identity, and yours is better or the others are wrong. And some of that it's even built into the institutions. But for
Yes.
those of us that truly want to get to God, want to wake up to our true nature, want to realize that self, that pure awareness, that diamond body, however we put it, we don't want to get caught in every nook and crevice along the road. And so I
Yeah.
try to stay as single pointed as I can on my path and journey and where I'm going, and not to worry about arguments or who's right or wrong, and remembering that there is this mountain, and whatever path one takes up the mountain, the fruit it bears in the end is the same. So you come to the same place at the mountain, no matter what road you take. And we don't have to spend time arguing about others' roads or that
Yes.
one road is better than another, not because it's good or evil, but just because it distracts us from our purpose. It distracts us from where we're going.
That path may look many different types of ways. And so just try to reserve judgment that you might not realize anything about another person's path because you're not meant to.
Yes. And I do love what you said on sadhana, it's called in the East, but on spiritual practice, it's very important that we can develop some, ultimately it becomes your life, but to develop
Yeah.
some consistency, because
Yeah.
we want to have a foundation and strong roots, and that whether things are good or bad, we know it's in God's will and it's for our highest good, and we can learn through the suffering. And many people, even close in my life, have started on a spiritual path and kind of done it out of I ought or I should do this, and then end up actually going into a further despair and kind of pushing themselves further away or falling away. And a thing
Mm-hmm.
Ramdas talked about is sometimes intellectually we can read some books and we understand maybe where things come out or the truth of these saints, but we have to have patience if we're not there yet. Right. And he called it
Yes.
sometimes phony, holy. You think, and he also talked about the opposite, phony, unholy, meaning like you're actually a higher being than you give yourself credit for. But
Yeah.
sometimes we can do the opposite, where you think you understand in your mind where the truth comes out, but you have to have patience and discipline and consistency with where you're at in any given moment and not get discouraged, even if you don't seem to make the progress you might want from day to day.
And then also on that point, just realizing that the truth somehow will always be a little bit bigger than your capability of comprehension. So just realizing, even though you're beginning to get spiritual attainment and some kind of real benefits out of practice, that it is almost always a fraction of the truth of the absolute reality, which is the way I sort of visualize it. It's just bigger than our sense of consciousness can even contain. So the vision I'm trying to explain is something like if you've heard of flatland before, and when 3D things come into flatland, they sort of act beyond the laws of physics for flatland, And it's the same for us when we are diving into spiritual areas, that we just don't fully have the capabilities to fully comprehend. And so there should always be this humility towards, I was gifted this attainment, but I still know only a fraction.
Yes. Ram Dass used to say there's a system can't know a system that's meta to it. And the thinking,
Yeah,
analytical, rational mind, the absolute is prior to that.
yeah,
And one way he talked about too with a second and third dimension is a way like if you had a piece of paper and you were only a 2D being, if you put the pencil right through the paper,
exactly.
you wouldn't see that. It would just look like a dot. But if you were 3D, you would say, oh, that's a pencil going through a piece of paper rather than just a dot. So we don't have the full picture of everything. And it helps me too to see that all words you could say are lies or are relative truths because they're
Mm-hmm.
pointing at the direct experience and realization. And they're
Yes.
very useful signposts and ladders on the way. But if we can avoid getting caught in concepts over the actual realization of truth, practice, and experience, then we can save ourselves from the pitfalls that come with dogma and getting stuck in ideas of what does this mean or that mean, because ultimately it's all pointing at something that words are unable to directly
Ex-
describe. Yeah.
exactly. This brings me very nicely to my next point, which is, if you, the listener, are an avid spiritual practitioner, you most likely have attained something at some point. And I think each one of those stepping stones has a little bit of danger where people tend to either slack off, or it's very normal in our culture to have this kind of goal oriented way of thinking where you can't really comprehend the places that it can go or that it can lead to, but you more or less think of it as being finished in some way, which I think is a very destructive way of thinking of the spiritual path in particular.
Yeah. For me, that's a very good point. And for me, it helps so much staying with the great saints of the world
Yes.
and
Hmm.
reading about their realizations and their experiences and attainments, because it does make you realize that there's deeper to go.
There's
There's
more.
deeper.
There's more. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, it also depends. Ramdas used to, he's been just coming in my life a lot, but he always said the path for enlightenment is a very specialized path, and not to pretend that's what you want if you don't. He's like, and if you just want a little better life or a little peace or a little happiness, then that's all you have to worry about. Maybe you can go to church on one Sunday and get a little better karma. But if you feel the pull to truly realize your innermost being, nature of truth in this life, then we have to dive all the way inside. Yeah.
Yeah, then we have to, as Jesus said, pray unceasingly. We need to be in a
Mm-hmm.
constant state of spiritual practice. Um,
Pray
uh,
unceasing.
there's this concept in the Western esoteric tradition of the heavenly sleep or the heavenly rest, where there comes a point where all of the practices that you've been doing up until this point, well, kind of won't work the same as they used to. And it's sort of time for you to make your material life into your practice. And that's what is sometimes referred to as heavenly rest.
I've never heard that term. That's beautiful. But yes, karma yoga in India is an idea of that too, because karma actually means action. So karma yoga is the yoga of action. So it's the yoga of everything you're doing in your daily life, making that your yoga, which means union. So making your daily life all part of your path to union.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Which I think really brings me nicely to the point that was supposedly initially supposed to be the main topic of our talk today, which was some of the non-spiritual things to keep in mind when pursuing spiritual practice. Things like physical health and mental health, because as you grow spiritually, it seems to me very apparent that it's not only your good aspects that grow. So keeping yourself very fresh and in the mindset of being even better and never really settling for the vices you have, instead attempting to constantly grow and constantly be better. And I think sometimes, especially for people that are, like we said, deeply into spiritual practice, it will be very important for them to pursue other ways of balance and other ways of health beyond meditation or working with spirits, what have you, that you might be doing. There's always going to be, if you haven't worked on the foundation, which the body is and the mind is, in some sense, then those complexes that you have brought with you into spiritual practice will be growing along with it. So in some cases, this can bring about a lot of mental disorder.
Yes. There's often, Ram Dass used to always say too, many people on the spiritual path, there's a lot of people that can do fine in ashrams and temples, but that are very neurotic in the world. And so, yeah, and I think without that grounding and without that base, it's easy to fall away or to get confused or to have some kind of spiritual experiences, but not understand or not have a
Mm-hmm.
grounding. And sometimes even people that end up in psych wards and stuff like that are people that I've noticed when I used to go to Narcotics Anonymous meetings are very tuned into the universe, but don't have the basic groundings both through study and through mind and body to understand really
Yes.
what's happening to them and
Yes.
end up, you know, communicating with spirits, but not knowing what's going on. And they end up in psych wards and on medications. And it doesn't always have to be to that extreme, but definitely super relevant. One thing for me that's very important is diet. And my diet isn't
Yes.
perfect, but the food we take in, and I'll use in the Hindu system, they talk about three types of food that's sattvic, which is pure and is conducive to positive energy vibrations in the body, food
Mm-hmm.
that is rajasic, which is more like gets you, makes the mind think more passionate, that type of thing, and then food which is tamasic, which is more lazy and dull, say like a box of candy. Rajasic would be like heavy meat eating, would be like rajasic, and then sattvic would be more pure food, just an example, like an apple or something. And all of our diets are a little different. But for me, diet, getting the right nutrients, healthy food, it not only affects the weight or the body, but even the stuff of the mind. And it's said that the
Yes.
mind can settle more purely in a pure diet. So for me, that's important. Another thing that we had talked about a little bit that I do is a lot of walking in nature, and I walk barefoot and just connect
Mm-hmm.
with the grass and with
Amazing.
the earth. Yeah, that's been a huge just natural part of my
Yes.
life and path and practice. And I do saunas a lot and hot yoga because I feel they're both very purifying and detoxing. Again, not just physical, but on all the energy levels. And so all these things are very useful for me. And meditation, not only the deeper aspects, but also just the calming of the mind and being more aware of the thoughts. If you want to get into a few things, but those are a couple things I
Yeah, that's
practice.
perfect. That's perfect. Thank you for sharing. I'll talk about something that came instantly to mind for me is a mental diet. What are you saying, doing, and thinking all day? Because that is also accumulating somewhere, usually in the
Huge.
subconscious parts parts of the mind. One of the things I want to definitely advise people to do on the spiritual path is journal, because when you have experiences that are hard to grasp, the mind will actually alter them over time. So being able to put them down somewhere and work on them, because the thing is, when you only keep it in the mind, it's a little bit too fluid to be able to sort of sort things out, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I will just add here a little bit of a journaling technique that I recently applied to my own life that I think is excellent for tackling some of those psychological complexes that people might be going through, and that I know that I have been going through, which is when you have momentum in a certain aspect that you do not prefer. It's actually really nice to personify or objectify them. So writing down in the journal a talk to the spirit of the thing that is bothering you. So in my case, working with my frustrations and with my anger, by giving it a name and then conversing with it, attempting to reprogram it in a way that is more beneficial to me in my life. And I think it's tremendously helpful, even just when it comes back up. Then at least you're like, oh, I know you. I know what's going on. Remember what we talked about? We're going to do it differently this time. And then uh, working on that over, of course, a long time will compound in tremendous ways.
Ramdas used to say, all the years of spiritual practice I've done, he said the same things still come up. He's like, but the difference is I invite them in for tea like old friends, like
Yes,
his
yes.
anger, lust, or whatever. Like, come here, like, hello, my friend, how are you?
It's so nice to see
Like, what?
you, because the thing is, those things are actually sources of energy. They're attempting to tell you something about you and your life that you might not be aware of. And the problem comes when we take them as absolute truth and we just run with them. But instead, we should attempt to work with them and not just listen to them unceasingly.
Yes, and it helps for one to cultivate the understanding that we are a many leveled, layered being with our many levels of energy bodies, and the conscious thinking person that most of the world is identified with, that's walking around all day thinking about their problems, making choices, is only the outermost aspect of your complete being. So we have
Exactly.
to allow ourselves to understand that we can get a little deeper and go beyond surface level. And sometimes it might be hard because you might have a life filled with people who don't do that and who only live on the surface. And that's why, since the beginning of time, the spiritual path is people who go deep into it often have to go against the grain of the world and are often misunderstood or thought to be crazy. And I know that there's people that perceive me in that way, but in a world of people that are asleep, when you start to wake up, of course, one might be misunderstood.
Yes.
But the people that you're meant to be with and around will definitely come into your sphere. But it might depend on the area. Like in my area, there's more of an abundance of those people. Like you said, where you are in Iceland, maybe not as much.
Well, I wouldn't say that, because there are spiritual
Mm.
communities, and I have been blessed with being introduced to some authentic people. But I've also heard of different experiences of people having a kind of spiritual ego and sort of portraying this absolute knowledge of things, and essentially telling people sort of the way without remaining humble in their ignorance of what could be happening. And so I think that's also very dangerous. Like, if you if you're eating good, you're doing yoga, right? You're meditating and you've experienced some things and then you want to share it with the world, but you can't tell the world how it is. That's the absolute opposite of what you're actually attempting to embody.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for all of us, I think humility, and that's what reverence and devotion is so helpful with too, because it does help cultivate humility. And Ramana Maharshi, this saint I love and have been studying with, says the door is very low to get to God, and one must be very humble.
Mm-hmm.
And we do, and at every chance, there is the opportunity to cultivate, to grow our ego, to
Yeah.
fall into those traps. So the more we can stay in humility, and for me, one way that is useful is by recognizing that there is more stars in our known universe than grains of sand on all the beaches in the universe, and that there is, even on Earth, trillions of life forms, and then beyond that, huge. So no matter what attainment or where, it's like also remembering that, and then remembering that nothing is actually happening, and even your growth and your path is just at the deepest level is a spontaneous unfolding and a natural
Yes.
waking up of a soul to God. But if we invest the person, the ego, the sense of I, thinking that it's better, then we get into trouble. And we all can do it to an extent, but remembering to keep coming back to that humility as best as we can.
One of my favorite things, and then we'll move on to another topic. But one of the things that helps me tremendously is a part in the Bible that says, "Treat everyone well." It's kind of like the golden rule: treat everyone well because you never know if you're talking to an angel. And then the more I've sort of contemplated that, the more I've realized, well, you're always talking to an angel. Well, there's always a choir of angels following each and every person around that has the capability of impacting your life in tremendous ways that might not be available to you if you only look at them as a person.
Yes, yes, that's beautiful. Every single person, being, or life form we encounter can be,
Yes.
can in a sense be the guru and can be the teacher, right? If we
And they
can
are.
look, and they are, if we can look behind or through the relative appearance.
Yes.
And in many of the teachings I study say give up appearances or see behind appearances. And when we're really open, God, the universe is teaching us through every single being and interaction that we have. And ultimately, it's coming from within us, and it's just manifesting what seems perceivingly outward. Um, and it's almost, one way I think of it too is the mother, which in the Eastern traditions is the universe, or Maya, the world of illusion. When you use one aspect of the mother, Ram Dass would say, to free you from the illusion of the mother. So even though the mother is the illusion, when you are ready to wake up from it, you call on the mother to wake you up from it. And then the experiences come in through this seeming dream world that you can
Mm-hmm.
use to liberate yourself. There was a saying that
Yes.
all spiritual practices are illusions created by illusionists to escape illusion. And I like that.
I like that too. One of the things that I'm shouting out in this project is this long running project I've had with a really good friend of mine, Ione de Sousa, originally from Portugal, but has lived almost all his life here in Iceland. And we've been working very close together on our project, About to Bloom. which I did shout out last time with the written works and with the mixtape that I was releasing. Since then, behind the scenes, he's been working on his master's project in digital fashion. We're about to get ready for the first rollout of this project, and so I will give you links to share in the description below so that you can follow us through this journey. But I wanted to tackle some of the themes because I think this project, beyond having stunning visuals and good music behind it, and some good knowledge as well, I think that the theme is definitely something that is important of exploring, which is a correlation between the artistic path of creativity and the spiritual path. So sort of the purity of expression, no matter what form of expression it might take, it's always, like you said before, the thing behind it is always this ambition for exploration and evolution and growth, which I think is behind every artist painting right now, and behind every monk praying right now as well, is this sense of growth and uh, finding out more things in the self than one was maybe aware of before. So taking that a little bit further, we were thinking a lot about the relationship between people and technology, and why it is so important for us to give out a spiritual message. And we think that we are in a pivotal time in technology where never before have we really had to look in the eyes sort of the fantastical nature of where technology is going. So having these super intelligences and having these easier and easier ways of not only expressing but exploring intelligence. So it's very important, I think, to throughout that exploration remain humble in self, remain humble in path, and treating this opportunity for what it really is, which is a tremendous tool for growth, and not as a way of escapism, which I feel like is happening to a lot of people right now with technology.
Yeah, social media and technology is like, in one aspect, we can access these great saints and teachers and teachings and books and paths and practices that thousands of years ago, that even 100 years ago or more would have been people who traveled across the world to find. In the United States, for example, people in middle America, say in 1900 or 1850, would have pretty much known the Bible, and that would have been the extent of that. So through social media and technology, it depends on our relationship to it.
Yes.
Because so much love and light and goodness, even a podcast like this, in times before technology couldn't have been shared. On the other hand, what you're saying, completely true. We can get stuck on scrolling and look at our phone times and notice hours and hours and days of time can be almost like mind-numbingly spent or wasted. And it depends also what we're feeding on that, because we can follow things online and on social media that are feeding our spirit, or we can it's a whole world. Honestly, it's a whole world within, and we can also fill ourselves with fear and anxiety and anger just through delving down different things and things getting pushed out there. So it's a very, now that you mention it, a very interesting world and time, and our relationship to that technology, I think, is really important, because it's ultimately it is God too, just like everything else is God too, but it's how we relate to it.
But this is exactly why me and Diona were so passionate about this project, because we might be, to some people, considered futurists. We are very excited for the technologies and the opportunities that are available to us and that continue to evolve and expand in miraculous ways. But in the end of the day, the reason why the spiritual message is so important in this conversation is because it is our relationship to ourselves that are being reflected in technology. So, for example, like you said, with the scrolling is only as a result of our goals, of the goals of the developers, of the goals of the programmers behind the technology. Well, their goals are not spiritually based. They're not even based in their own best self-interest. I think Steve Jobs famously said that he would never give his children his own technology, which is very very crazy thing to say, right? But here's where it gets important. If we settle in a spiritual foundation, then the technology will be reflected in the same light. If we truly tell ourselves the narrative of what we want and what we need out of our lives, and then of course this technology we're creating will reflect that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. And I know for me, being open, like many times, my guru and some of the greatest reminders I'll have throughout the day will come to me through social media, will come because of what I follow and how I'm open to it, because that's God too. So sometimes I'll get Maharaji, who I have here in the picture for those watching, will come through to me in a beautiful thing online, exactly what I need to hear. And I'm like, oh wow, it's incredible. But yeah, I love the topic because there's also a lot of fear by a lot of people that are resentful against
Oh yeah.
artificial intelligence and technology rising. And I understand that too, rightfully so. But we all have to basically adapt in our own way and figure out our own, right, our own relationship to it, like our own way of operating through it, whether it is to be someone who uses it very little or very much. Yeah. And finding the good in ways that that could benefit. But I also think that, you know, millions and billions of people are also helped and reached, and beautiful organizations and everything through technology, which was not there before. It's easy to sometimes
Yes.
focus on the negatives, but there's also a whole other side to it, which has transformed, you know, so much of this world.
It only gets reflected. So if people are portraying this message of fear, it only gets reflected in the technology. So, for example, due to years and years of media following the more negative narrative, due to our own primal instinct to resonate more with staying atop of things to fear rather than not, I think it's very important to realize that the only true enemy lives within, and that everything else is just a shadow of the true thing, which is our own sense of separation.
And that's the truth. And that's what I've been sharing a lot too, is that ultimately, that's the complete truth. Everything, you actually only ever know yourself, and you're only ever within yourself, and everything you ever perceive, love, hate, fear, any person that makes you feel good or bad is always actually only within your own self, which is pretty interesting. And for me, it helps to not, whenever I have the tendency to project outward or to blame or even to be afraid, remember that the feeling, the sense, the thoughts are within your own being. So it's within
Yes.
you that you address them rather than blaming someone out there, because it's all in you.
Well, it's funny because you mentioned the mother earlier. So there's a term in the Western esoteric tradition called the sphere of sensation. You heard about that?
No.
So the sphere of sensation is kind of like the screen of which we are actually only experiencing. So everything externally is only experienced through the sphere of sensation. So your inner reality is actually projecting a bunch of things on top of the
Mm.
screen that is constantly around you. And in my current understanding of the subject, that is the mother. The mother is the all accepting aspect of self that will always just lovingly, oh, you want to project this? I will lovingly oblige and show you all these nightmares that you're projecting onto me without judgment.
Yes.
But the loving mother will also be the only thing that frees you when she starts to unravel all these psychological complexes or things that might be troubling you from within. And then you begin to first in your life experience the sphere sensation as a clear and true reflection of the absolute reality, which is love.
Which is love, which is here and now. And I'm glad you got back into that, because when I was explaining about the mother earlier, that's what I was trying to get at. But I think you made it a little more clear from both aspects of how it'll manifest. And yeah, that we have love and freedom available to us in every moment. And that's why I love Ramana Maharshi so much, who I've been studying, and people listening. There's a beautiful, beautiful movie about him on YouTube called, I believe, Gaze of Grace. And he was a great saint that lived in India until 1950. But he spoke about, really, it's when you start to think about it, pure enlightenment, love, awareness, it's not something you're attaining that was never there, because only that which is eternal is real. So everything else is impermanent, which is actually unreal. So that which is real is here all along, including right now, this very second, when you're hearing those words. So that love, the freedom, is not only accessible at every moment, but it's what you are. It's what encompasses everything. And one experience I had done psychedelic mushrooms, and I was in Taos, New Mexico, at the near the Neem Curly Baba ashram. And what I experienced was, first, a huge, huge amount of suffering and crying, because I was seeing all of the suffering in the universe. And it was just
Yeah.
pretty much unbearable, but yet you bear it. But it was really, really painful. And I had been there before, so I wasn't a stranger to this, but I'm crying and I'm seeing the vast scale of suffering that exists. And then I seen it all within, not only is it all within love, it all is love, but it was like surrounded in a continuum of love, and it is love. So it is all love and consciousness that encompasses everything, even the seeming appearances of suffering,
Mm-hmm.
even the seeming appearances, which doesn't mean that the suffering is easy or that it's not relevant, but it is, it's very painful. And for many people on earth
Yeah,
right
I
now,
know. Yeah.
experiencing all kinds of terrible things, but it is somehow, some miraculous way, it is actually all held within love, within consciousness.
Yeah, surrounded by the Great Mother that will dive with you to the darkest depths, but also all the way to the brightest lights.
Yes. Yes. That's what Kali is in the Hindu tradition. Kali Ma, and I have a tattoo of her on, a huge one, but she's fierce, and her form looks terribly ugly, and she's got a tongue sticking out, gorged with blood, a necklace full of skulls, a dagger. Sometimes it's even depicted as like eating the babies, because it's the mother, all those dark depths. But then when you see Kali in truth, and when you feed your impurities to Kali, and when you ask
Yes.
her to free you and
Yes.
liberate you, then you see her in her beautiful form that is also there. So I love that aspect. There's a vision of the mother in Hinduism, which is eating the babies and giving birth to them, because the mother is all the time giving birth to the universe, sustaining it, and also consuming it, which is an incredible thing.
There was an amazing truth revealed to me through the Agori tribe that follow some of the more dark practices in Hinduism, and they are all constantly working with Kali, the Dark Mother. One of the things that really sort of sat with me in their truths is that they do all these crazy antics and I mean, to me, pretty fantastical, gnarly things in an attempt to see God there. So they go there not because they're attempting to be edgy. I mean, I'm sure a lot of them maybe are, but they go there to confront their own inner darkness and to be liberated from it. They actually see the light that is concealed in darkness and they attempt to free it.
That's a, they call that, I think, I forgot if it's called the right hand path or the left hand path in Hinduism, maybe left, but yeah, that's a fair path and a road and a karmic calling, but definitely some beautiful lessons to be learned there.
If you're able to see past the drinking blood and essentially alcoholism and drug abuse that they that they partake in, one of the things I learned from their tradition is they never actually do the things that they want to do when introduced to the Gori practices. So, for example, if you want to become an Agori student, your guru will never allow you to do the practice that you want to do. He will always see, what is it that you least want to do?
Wow.
Do that. Do that. That's where the light is.
Right. And in a way that could burn out sort of your attachment and craving and clinging to all things, or even to avoiding your aversions.
Yeah.
It can burn out your
Yes.
aversions and see all things as God, as the source. Yeah, I love that you brought that up. I've heard of that tribe and I'm familiar with some of that. So that's an incredible lesson for all of us to see. And before we end up finishing, is there anything more you wanted to share about your music or anything else?
There's my mixtape and single are coming out this autumn in October and November, most likely, maybe September and November, depending on my schedule, really. The single is called Freeze, and I will be continuing the mixtape series, which is a collection of old unreleased songs that I will be continually rolling out as I'm sort of beginning to respect and love and admire my own artistic journey more and more as I grow.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, for everyone on here, we will have ways to contact Leeví and links to find all of his work on our YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, on everywhere that this is offered, so you can connect with him and his music that's coming out. So you can follow him on Instagram or Facebook. And I'm sure we will be back on with another podcast sometime in the future.
Yeah, yeah. I think I'll also finish up by saying if anybody is intrigued at all, that you should not resist and contact me if there are any questions or any things that I can help with. I would be happy to oblige.
Beautiful. Yeah. He's a very helpful person on the path. Thank you so much. I love you and I love everyone listening. And I pray that we can all surrender like we did in the beginning and say, Thy will be done, and show us the way that leads out of suffering into eternal life, and be of service to others. Get out of self obsession and wake up to that love that we really are on this earth and in this life and right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.